Welcome back, Honors. Welcome back to it, and welcome back to your Flip Classroom and our discussion of the rise of the Stuart monarchy in England, right? As a part of our grander, larger absolutism in the 1600s unit, right? So we talked a lot of stuff in class before y'all left out, right? And I loved y'all's engagement. I loved how into it you were. I saw kids being like, oh my gosh, what's going on? I saw Sydney Nuss being like, what? And like talking about that crazy execution story. But yeah, to kind of recap where we were talking about, we were discussing the death of Elizabeth Tudor, right, which happened in 1603, and how literally the person that was supposed to take over was Mary, Queen of Scots, her cousin. Problem is that in 1587, she died. So like almost 20 years earlier, she is already dead. So that leaves one person, and not even was she just dead. She was executed for treason in a crazy story involving a wig and a dog and bleh, and a rookie executioner that was absolutely ridiculous, and it's one of my favorite stories to tell all year. But then we left off talking about how she did have a son with that guy, Lord Darnley, right? And his name, of course, was James. And by this point in his life, by 1603, James is in his 30s and he's the King of Scotland, right? So the throne is entitled to him because he is Elizabeth's closest living relative, right? Why are we doing this? So we can avoid a succession crisis. We don't need another war or a civil war or anything like that going on in England fighting over this vacant throne. So the throne is going to pass to James the Sixth of Scotland, who is, most importantly, very Protestant. He is not like his mother, Mary, Queen of Scots, who was a Catholic, actually. He is actually like a Protestant, much like Elizabeth was. So this is meant to be a very easy and very smooth transition into a new family, which will rise to power. And this is going to be the rise of the Stuart monarchy. This is one of the areas of expertise that I have in European history. I love the Stuart monarchy. I think it's wild. It's ridiculous. Like, spoiler alert, there's a civil war that's going to break out later. But we'll get to all that stuff here in a second. So James the Sixth of Scotland will become the new king of England, right? James is already married. He has a couple of kids. And I believe there's a very solid chance if you have Mr. Troy Roddy for English class, you've already talked about this guy. One of the events about him, he was alive during the reign, or not during the reign, he was alive while William Shakespeare was alive. And actually, James, on his way down to England to take the throne as well as to just kind of move around the Isles, he literally got caught in a series of storms. Then he almost died in, and his ship almost wrecked. And he blamed it on the several witches that he thought lived in Scotland. That was the inspiration for Macbeth. Mr. Roddy told me he talked to y'all about James the First / James the Sixth. He's one of my favorite people to talk about. But what did I just say right there? James the First / James the Sixth. How does this guy have two numbers? Yep. See what happened there? You got to know one big thing right here, okay? He is the only British monarch leading up to this point that we'll ever refer to with two numbers, okay? James the First of England, James the Sixth of Scotland, because he becomes the very first King James of England, but he's the sixth James of Scotland. Now, this is a really, really big moment because we're having a very large event go down. What's happening is, one, you're seeing the monarchy pass to a new group, right? The Stuarts of Scotland. And also, you're seeing something happen. The King of Scotland is now also the King of England. So an event known as the Union of the Crowns occurred, right? Write that down. The Union of the Crowns, where Scotland, England, and Wales became one contiguous country, okay? Now, big thing you need to understand about James, though, is he's coming in with a different set of ideas, okay? A lot of people always ask, oh, well, did he hate the English because they killed his mom and stuff like that? Really, really great question, Caitlin Strimlau. He actually didn't. He wanted his own power and stuff like that. And also, you got to remember, his mom left Scotland when he was a 1-year-old, right? So he never even really knew her, okay? So the big thing about it, though, is he just wants to reign supreme and have as much power as he can get his hands on. Now, there's something, though, in England that's standing in the way of that. And it's that thing known as Parliament, right? Parliament is the thing that will stand in his way because something you need to understand about James is James wants to be an absolutist, right? He believes in that concept known as the divine right of kings, right? Remember what we talked about with an absolutist? If you're going to be an absolutist, you got to have that bureaucratic system, that centralized government, and that divine right to rule, okay? Well, he has the bureaucracy. That's the parliament, right? He needs the parliament to help him actually officiate over the entirety of the British Isles. He has the centralization ruling from London and also Edinburgh when he's in Scotland. It's that divine right idea that he believes he has that the people of England do not, all right? So, like, the people of England see their monarch as a constitutional monarch, right? Because remember, due to the fact that there's the Magna Carta, Exactly. That limits his power, creating him into a constitutional monarch. He will never have the ability to be the absolutist that he wants to be, right? So the thing you need to understand about it, though, is doesn't matter. He still believed he was an absolute ruler regardless, because he can see the trends growing in Europe. He knows about Charles V. He knows about Philip II reigning supreme in Spain. He knows about the Habsburgs and the Holy Roman Empire that have reigned as basically absolute rulers this entire time. He wants that same kind of power. He thinks that it is trivial and silly that he has to share his power with this parliamentary government, with this legislative body that's made up with the House of Commons and has all these different people in it. He doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to do it even a little bit. He wants supreme, full power on his own, okay? But he's got some problems, all right? The biggest one being the parliament. The parliament is not going to allow him to do this, okay? The parliament is like, no. We are not going to allow you to come into power. We're not, or excuse me, they're going to allow him to be king, but we're not going to allow you to come into here and act like you can spend the money the way you want, do all the different things you want, or do whatever you want, right? So the big thing that happens, though, is he comes to power and he has to deal with the parliament, right? Another big problem he has, Puritans, okay? Something that's going down in England right now that he has a huge issue handling and dealing with, that Elizabeth was a professional at handling and dealing with, is the fact that he's got Puritans, right? He's got several different religions running around in England right now that are all kind of vying for control, all right? So now there's an interesting little thing going on. For example, Mary Queen of Scots was loved by the secret Catholics of England, the Catholics that were kind of secretly hiding out in England, that wanted to remain Catholic, that were happy when Bloody Mary came to power. Those people still there in the background. Then there's the Anglicans, that is the bulk of England and stuff like that. But then in Scotland, you got Presbyterians, and they're a type of a type of Calvinist, and then you've got Puritans in England. Now, really quickly, who are these Puritans? What do they do? Why are they called this? They're called Puritans because they believed that there was too many Catholic elements inside of the Anglican Church, right? And they're not wrong. Anglican priests wear the same exact outfit that Catholic priests wear, right? Anglican masses give the Eucharist just like a Catholic one does. The only difference is that the altar is not made of stone, it's made out of wood, right? It was very much, Anglicanism was very much a diet Catholic religion because it was started by Henry VIII just because he wanted to get a divorce, okay? So when we're looking at this entire thing, the Puritans want to purify the elements of the Catholic Church out of the Anglican Mass and out of Anglicanism, and they're a type of Calvinist. So the thing about it, though, is that you got to understand is that's why they're called Puritans. And James doesn't like them because they're constantly critical of him. They're constantly critical of the Anglican Church and the Archbishop of Canterbury. And the other big reason why is, in the long run, they're starting to get elected to Parliament, and they're starting to have a louder voice, right? Also, the biggest thing that James wants, the biggest problem he has, is he wants more money. And he wants more money so he can spend it on himself, okay? So the thing about it, though, that you need to understand about James is that there are several different little elements of his story that are going to be really, really big. He's going to get into constant fights and arguments with Parliament. He's going to also, though, start the colonization period of England, right? Jamestown, Virginia, which was founded in 1607, is named after James the First/the Sixth, right? He actually helped colonize this entire thing, and the Virginia Company that was started in namesake of Elizabeth is going to be the company that actually founds that original colony. They're going to discover tobacco and all this other stuff, but we'll get to that here in a hot second. And then there's this other thing, the Plymouth Colony, right? The Plymouth Colony was started by Puritans. James was like, look, you're annoying the ever-loving daylights out of me. I want you out of here. It's actually supposed to say 1620, by the way. I was like, I want you out of here. Get out of my face. Go get on the Mayflower. Leave from Plymouth and then land in Plymouth. And so they end up founding a Puritan colony in Plymouth. Now, another set of crazy things goes down as well for him, and we'll skip around a little bit. For example, he has the King James Version of the Bible written, okay? This is really, really big. The English Bible that a lot of Protestants use is the King James Version of the Bible. It's the leading English example of the Bible. Then you also have the fact that, the gunpowder plot, which is going to be a massive, massive thing that goes down. So on November 5th, 1605, something crazy is going to happen. Well, a lot of Catholics, when James came to power, got really, really excited because they were like, oh, he's the son of Mary Queen of Scots, an avid Catholic. Maybe he'll lift a lot of these restrictions on us and allow us to practice in public and allow us to live our lives. Well, actually, when James came in, he followed suit with the Parliament because the Parliament had an increasing amount of Puritans being elected to it, and he actually passed more laws limiting Catholics and limiting their public worship and limiting their ability to practice their religion. And so what's going to end up happening is something that is absolutely wild and is going to set up many, many large traditions in England going forward. On November 5th, 1605, there's this thing known as the Gunpowder Plot. And what ended up happening is this man right here is a very, very well-known figure. He's a man by the name of Guy Fawkes, right? Fawkes spelled F-A-W-K-E-S, okay? Guy Fawkes, okay? Now, Guy Fawkes and a group of his buddies are Catholics that live in England. And they decided on November 5th, when James came down to address Parliament and try to open up ceremonies, they were going to blow him up. And so what they actually did is they shoved several tons of gunpowder underneath the Parliament building, as you can see in the background behind his shoulder. They shoved a ton of those barrels down there with the intention of exploding it and killing James while he was addressing Parliament. But what ended up happening is, after a random search and also the fact that some of his buddies probably narked him out, Guy Fawkes got captured, and then he actually was tortured, interrogated, he gave up all of his friends, and then they were all executed, right? And what ended up happening is November 5th became a very large anti-Catholic holiday in Great Britain, in England. And funny enough, they still celebrate it to this day. It's called Bonfire Night, actually. They actually light these big bonfires, and they used to burn effigies of Guy Fawkes. And you've seen Guy Fawkes' face before, you've just seen it as a mask, right? Guy Fawkes is actually today used as a symbol of political dissent and stuff like that. And for any of y'all that have ever heard of that guy Anonymous online and stuff like that does the leaks, he wears a Guy Fawkes mask, right? Trying to pay a tribute to the guy that tried to blow up the King of England. So that's a big thing, okay? And there's even a very famous poem that goes along with it. And it says, remember, remember the 5th of November, the gunpowder treason and plot. I should think of no reason why the gunpowder treason shall ever be forgot, right? Like, which is like, you gotta love that event story, right? But again, like I said, King James Version of the Bible, the Gunpowder Plot. So obviously, there's a lot of people in England that don't like James very much, right? Another interesting little thing, though, is James comes along and he tries to start doing all this goofy stuff where he tries to make tobacco illegal, and then basically the English people laugh in his face and then keep smoking the tobacco anyway. We'll talk about that a little bit more in class, so I don't take up your entire Sunday. He also, though, wants to raise taxes for himself, okay? He wants to raise taxes because there's this one arbitrary tax that he's allowed to collect, that he's allowed to use as his own personal piggy bank, and it's called tonnage and poundage. But he wants more money. So he actually tried at one point to raise taxes by himself, and Parliament told him no. They were like, no, you may not do that. You get a stipend and an allowance from the English government. That's how much you get. That's how much you'll spend. Shut your mouth. Quit being a baby. And what ends up happening is he dissolved Parliament. Now, this is big, okay? Write this down. Dissolved Parliament, okay? He fired them at one point, which is a power that he actually has, but it only is supposed to be used in times of emergency, and he's using it like a toddler pitching a fit, okay? Now, also, there was some controversy as well, because this guy right here is the Duke of Buckingham, and it was his very close, very personal best friend. And there was all this other crazy stuff that ran around, like these mean sayings that went around England, where apparently English people used to say, oh, the Duke of Buckingham, when we had Elizabeth, we had our king, now we have James, our queen, which is very offensive and super rude. But at the same time, a lot of scandalous stuff going down in the reign of James the First, okay? So now the thing about it, though, is James obviously is going to fail at absolutism. He's going to try to do a lot of different stuff. He's going to try to raise taxes. All he ever really successfully does, though, in his 20-year reign, is he manages to just kind of make the English people mad and just make Parliament mad and make them realize that they basically have a problem on their hands, right? Where this Stuart family from Scotland believes that they're entitled to ultimate, supreme, and constant power within England and stuff like that. Well, then you have to understand as well, though, as James is not going to live forever, right? He's not going to live forever because he ends up dying in 1625. Now, when he dies in 1625, 20 years after he was almost blown up at Parliament, who's going to take over? Well, he had two sons. He had two sons, one named Henry and one named Charles, right? Now, the thing about it, though, is everybody was super excited for Henry to take over because when James actually moved to London, he brought Henry with him, right? He left his wife, or no, he brought his wife down with him as well. He brought Henry with him, but he left his son and his daughter back in Scotland, his other son. And his other son was named Charles, right? The reason why he said he left Charles behind is because, like, Charles was a very sickly kid, right? And almost died multiple different times. And apparently, literally wouldn't even survive the trip to London, but this young man was just left at a castle in Scotland, in Edinburgh, pretty much by himself with his sister, and then his sister would eventually die, and he was left alone, only with teachers and tutors around, and it turned him into a pretty angry, upset guy. Well, the thing about it is, everyone was like, who cares about Charles? Henry's going to take over one day, and he'll become Henry the Ninth, and we're all going to love him to death. But then Henry died. Henry died of a mysterious fever that popped up in the middle of the night, which means that Charles is actually going to have to reign supreme, and he's pretty upset right now, right? He's pretty upset because he believes in some aspects that his father believes in. He believes in that divine right to rule. He believes in all those different ideas. He believes in, like, the idea of an absolutist, just not James's version of one, right? So he wanted to be the ultimate supreme ruler of England, not like James, his father, right? His dad wanted to raise money so he could have big parties and stuff like that and hold court and do all this other different stuff where basically people would fawn over him and be like, oh, James, you're so smart and blah and charismatic. So the thing about it, though, is Charles, on the other hand, is like, oh, no, 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 no. I want to be a powerful monarch. I want to rule over my people with impunity, right? And he also thought war was one of the best ways to exert power. Well, the thing about it, Charles, is war costs a lot of money, right? Like so, and we'll get into all this stuff, and we'll start our next lesson on the reign of Charles I and all this craziness that has been going down with James when I see y'all next time, okay? But y'all have a great one. Enjoy your weekend. I'll see y'all soon.